Hello, everyone, and welcome to Profiles in Risk. I am your host, Nick Lamparelli. On this beautiful Friday afternoon, I am pleased to introduce Scott Knowles. Scott is the CEO and founder of Shift Insurance Applications. Shift has developed Modgic, an experience modification calculator and in-depth experience rating analysis software platform, providing XMod calculations and predictions in most states. Scott, welcome to Profiles in Risk.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite.
Our good friend Justin Fowler made the introduction. He's a comp guy. He said that you were doing some really interesting stuff over at Shift. So I always start off, I kick it over to the guest. What is Shift Insurance Applications in your own words?
So Shift Insurance Applications is really a company that we started about 8 years ago. It was something that we developed with the name Shift in mind. I brought it up because of a little bit of a frustration in the marketplace. The insurance industry is really interesting because technology hasn't really caught up to the industry yet. And I found that gleaming in my face.
I've never heard that before.
It's interesting because reality is that there is technology out there, but it's really not the technology that you would expect to see. So when we started Shift, it came around a concept of something that I needed personally as a producer. And the name Shift means I wanted to make a change. Really, I wanted to shift the industry as best as I possibly could and get people to kind of realize that, it was really necessary to make that shift. So Shift Insurance is really, conceptually the company that we designed to really change an industry as best as we possibly could, really starting revolving around workers' compensation.
Yeah, so your product name is Modgic, which I asked you right before the show how to pronounce it, and then it makes perfect sense. So I've dealt in workers' comp before. I used to place it, so I'm vaguely familiar with the XMod, but probably a lot of our audience is not familiar with it. So can you give us a little bit of that backstory and talk about how did Modgic come to be? So, if you can go into the XMod and then why did you develop Modgic? I think our audience would appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Modgic, interestingly enough, was really something that was never to be marketed. I built a product for myself for what we talked about at the beginning, which is a lack of products in the industry. I was a producer for Century Insurance, which was a direct writer for about 6-7 years. And as a direct writer, I had my own product. I had something that nobody else had. So when I knocked on somebody's door, it was very easy for me to create an opportunity and also, be reliant to the fact that I was the only one who could present that. When I left Century, I decided to go to the broker world. And when I did, all of a sudden I realized that, everybody's got the exact same thing. So how do you really differentiate yourself? And I remember going to the broker I was working for at that time who had brought me on board, and I said, hey, Bill, tell me what's so different about us? I mean, what can I really say to try to get these businesses to want to take a quote from me? Because, my pretty face is only going to take me so far. Aside from that, I mean, I got to figure out a way to make myself look, better. And, it was kind of like, well, just our brokerage is well known in the industry. You can mention that, and, we do this. And I just thought, what, that's just not going to do it. I have to really find a way to set myself apart. Under that constraint is really where Modgic, the idea came from, of trying to develop something that would really, give me that opportunity. Taking it from there, my next step was, well, I was always a very straightforward, honest, ethical person. I wanted to make sure that whatever it was that I was doing was going to be not a sales-oriented idea, but really something that was going to help my clients make an educated decision. So really, that's what the whole product is developed around, is providing information that gives the client, the real user, which is the business owner, an opportunity to make the right decision based on facts, not based on fiction, not based on what the broker says, but really based on the truth.
What is the truth? What?
That's a good point. It's interesting because the truth is that the insurance industry itself, a lot of business owners don't understand. When they buy insurance, and they're getting insurance quotes from companies, why is my premium so high? They don't really conceptualize the idea that an insurance company is really an investment firm. When they're creating a partnership with them, they're really looking for a good, solid investment. So if you can get that business owner to understand that that's what they're looking for, developing the idea and the concept to them that, we need to give you something, or let that insurance company understand that there is a reason why you are a good investment, right? And so the truth of the matter is that, we've got to figure out as producers, the right way to educate our clients into doing the right things to make them that good investment, and then be able to also really make it a profitable venture for that insurance company. So that's in my mind, it's, the truth is telling the truth and really passing that along and educating our clients, about, what things are and how they work.
Yeah. So Scott, let's break it down. What is an experience mod?
Absolutely. So an experience mod essentially is a credit or debit that is applied to a business based on its experience in the marketplace, and is specifically in their industry. So, for example, in your state, if you're a car dealer or whatever you are, you have certain expectations of losses that are expected by the state. That expected ratio is essentially determined by the whole conglomerate of dealers in a specific class code. So, for instance, you have clerical, which, you and I right now are playing the clerical role, so of all the clerical people and all the people who do clerical in the state of California or whatever state you may be in, there's an assigned factor to that says, well, we expect a clerical person to have this many injuries and it's supposed to cost this much in a particular year. So a business owner is given an experience mod, which hopefully is a credit, where if they don't have any clerical incidents, well, then the state's going to say, you know what, congratulations, we're going to give you a credit or this experience mod. And the experience mod essentially is a calculation or a factor that's used to calculate or provide a credit or debit against your premium at the end of the day. So it's extremely important to understand how it works and how you can actually use that mod.
Yeah. So this is the way I understand workers' compensation. I know that it's heavily regulated. I know that in most states, it's the state itself that's setting the rate for that particular class code. So are you saying that for experience mod, does the state have to bless that number as well?
So the state doesn't necessarily have to bless it. The state generates it. But each year, what they do is they review the losses for the entire year and what it could or couldn't be. There's workers' compensation is interesting because there are different factors, right? Experience mod is one factor, which is extremely important. It's a controllable factor that's controlled by the business owner, right? They're the ones who truly can control what happens at their operation, what kind of safety measures they put in to reduce their potential risk. Well, in workers' compensation, you have a couple other factors that affect really the premium. You have the rate, right? The rate is what also is generated by an approval from the state. So based on that class code, each insurance company has to submit their request for that rate to be approved. And then you have credits. They also have to submit to the state to be able to apply a certain amount of credits against or debits against that rate. And then the third factor is really the experience mod. So there's some controllables here that take place with workers' compensation, which are really important. Finding the right insurance company who understands your operations as a business owner is very important. So a producer has to go find all these insurance companies who really focus on that particular type of business. And then they have to determine which one of those rates is appropriate. And then they need to convince the insurance company. This is really important because there's a couple sales that a producer really has to make. They have to sell that business by gathering information and providing the necessary data to the insurance company so that they can get those credits that they also filed for. Because you want to get as many credits as possible, because that's really the job of the producer, and to get those scheduled credits. And then it's the job of the producers to educate their client to get them to reduce their experience mod through safety and other measures that they can implement.
Yeah. So how does Modgic help if the state's creating the experience mod? Does Modgic correct the state, or is Modgic more of a tool for the agent to help the agent figure out what steps they need to take to reduce their experience mod?
It's actually both. We don't physically correct the state, but what we do is the state isn't perfect. No state is perfect. Errors take place. A producer's job is to find out if there were any errors that took place and pinpoint them and provide the proof behind it. Our system, what it does is it allows you to input information into the system, and then it will spit out what an experience mod is and what it should be. Now, if there's a difference between what our system generates and what the state is generating, well, that gives that producer the ability to challenge that with the state. It may have been a mistake on the unit stat filing that took place, which is the responsibility of the insurance company. It may have been an internal clerical error on the part of the Bureau itself and its individual state. So there's different factors there that can affect that side.
How often does that potentially happen?
Actually, it happens a little more often than you'd think. You hope that it wouldn't happen that often, but again, we're dealing with a government agency where, unfortunately, we do see those errors, so it's really important for a producer to really be on top of their game to make sure that they are doing all the steps and taking all the steps necessary. So Modgic provides that piece of the tool for them to do that initial analytical part. Now, it's interesting, it's not necessarily the producer who always does that. In most retail brokers, they actually have risk analysts who actually utilize the software to do that part. Now, from the producer's standpoint, the other piece is really being able to use Modgic themselves from a sales perspective. Now, they're not just going to use it to sell to the client, but they're also going to use it to sell to the underwriter, right, that we talked about before, which is really important. Showing trend lines from the history. And that's one of the key things that our software does. It's different than any other software that's out there, is we look at the past. It's important to get a picture of what somebody's going to do in the future if you can see the trending from the past. But then also we look at what is the future potential. I think, we talk about an experience mod. What a lot of people don't talk about, what's really the most important part of an experience mod, is what's known as the low mod, the no loss mod. For me, I look at this number as the absolute most important part, not only of our software, but of what a producer needs to educate their clients on. And what I mean by that is, if you are a business owner and you want to look at where you are currently and what your premium base is and how much premium you're overpaying because the experience mod is not at that low, well, that's where that low is so important. You don't know what that number is. We look for different ways to really move our clients to make decisions. An experience mod to an agent is meaningful. An experience mod to a business owner is not necessarily so meaningful because they don't really understand it. What they do understand is money. So when we can turn that mod and those numbers and points into dollars and cents, that's when we can get them to move. Trying to get a business owner to invest in safety and to reduce claims is really hard when you can't show them how much money they've already overspent by having that low mod and comparing it to the high mod over the prior years and generating that into a dollar amount and then showing them this big figure and saying, look, you are already overspent $300,000. Do you want to think that that was a good investment? Or maybe we should look at a little piece of that $300,000 and invest it into the future, because here's where we could go. So that's really the key point of a producer and what they can and can't do, is by showing them this road. And that's what makes us very unique, because we do and can show them not just next year, but we look at how long it would take us to get to that low mod. And that's what's important.
So I've never heard of the low mod before. So it's funny because I've done comp, never heard of that number. Is that something is that something that's generated in elsewhere, like by the state, or is that something that's very specific to Modgic?
So it's somewhat specific to Modgic, but it's in California, they do provide you with what's called the no loss mod. It's on the experience mod worksheet, but on an NCCI experience mod worksheet, it's not there. So in the rest of the United States, they have no idea what the low mod is. That's why it's so important. Even in California, you can see what it is, but you can't really relate, what's the dollar and cents difference between here and here. If I'm paying a 1.0 experience mod and my low is really a 0.45 or a 0.50, and I'm paying $100,000 a year, you just threw away $50,000. Mm-hmm. So that's where the importance of Modgic is it's really trying to show that big dollar amount that's in there.
It's strange because I've always considered, I've put workers' comp and personal auto in the same category because they're highly regulated at the state level. And a lot of states, I started my my profession in Massachusetts. The state used to set the auto rate, and companies couldn't differentiate themselves. Like everyone charged the same rate. I always felt comp was like in a similar category where it was just incredibly difficult to differentiate yourself. Mm-hmm. What you've brought to the table though is a tool to differentiate yourself. Like if without that, if you're just relying on the state information competing against everyone else that is using just the state rate, the state mod, you're basically everyone's the same, and yours is that one factor that can really differentiate yourself.
Yeah, and that's really part of the focus of our company. It's the primary focus of our company is we have to educate our consumers. Our consumers are obviously brokers, insurance companies, MGAs, in letting them understand that the purpose of doing this report that we generate is really to start your clients off, and not only to educate your client, but also educate the producer, right? A lot of producers look in this little space here today. What's today look like? What's this year look like? I forgot about last year. But to really open up their mind to everything that's been going on and where this past history has been, talking about, look, Mr. Business Owner, you've had a problem, right? So then Modgic takes it to the next step and says, well, now that we know what the problem is, here's where the problem specifically is, because we break down the claims by nature, cause, body part, so that they can really then key in and focus on, oh, wow, I'm having a lot of issues here, right? Well, let's talk about where this is, how much this is costing you. Let's talk about how much every single one of these claims individually has cost you. Let's talk about Jack, specifically, who hurt his back, how much he cost you and how much he individually affected the experience mod. And now let's look at what we can do as a broker to help you resolve these issues, because let me show you a picture at what the future could look like. And we do that in 3 different ways. We look at, the data that you put in the system, and we say, okay, what happened over the last 5 years? Based on the last 5 years, where do we think you might go based on this information? And then we say, but from this point forward, if you have no more claims, guess what? You can get down to this low mod, and you can save this much money over the next 5 years if you have no more claims. Well, it's not necessarily realistic to say, hey, snap my fingers and the claims go away. But still, it puts the thought in the mind of the business owner that there is a possibility. Mm-hmm. There's a way to get there, instead of just blatantly looking at, here's your policy here. We're gonna talk numbers. We're gonna fight price. That's what I'm doing as a broker. I want to fight price, price, price. No, guess what? I'm the trusted advisor. That's a key word in sales that is so important to any good salesperson and producer, is being that trusted advisor. So we really provide the tool that educates the clients, that turns that producer from a salesperson into the trusted advisor in a single call, a no relationship, and those are the stories that we love to hear from our users is, Hey, I just walked into this client. I showed him what we could do. I walked out with a VOR in one meeting. It's really good. That's what I did. That's all I did.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. What's the state of the market, workers' comp?
I think the market is always changing. Workers' compensation is fluctuating. It goes up and down on a regular wave. We see rates and premiums go up, and then we see them drop. And it's in many cases it becomes industry specific. In many cases, it's not. I would say that the market itself today and where it's going, it can go anywhere. We just don't know what the next steps are. I will tell you, though, that the way that I look at what could happen in the future, and especially what we're seeing right now on the legislative side, and how that could potentially, drive, what's taking place, state by state. Medical costs are going through the roof, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we think about, what's driving that, when you think about the average person, they spend 8 to 10 hours a day at work, right? And those are active times. So workers' compensation, in reality, when is an injury most likely to happen? It's during that time frame. It's not when you're at home necessarily. It's not when it's on the weekend, but it's during that time frame. So who's really driving these rising insurance costs? Well, in most cases, it's on the workers' compensation side, in my opinion. That's what's really pushing our medical costs through the roof. Aside from disease, obviously, but from an injury standpoint, that's really, what's pushing this rising cost. So finding something and a way to help control that and bring that down is really important. And I think that we can hopefully help get that moving forward as our education strive continues to move forward. And, my hopes is that we can find better ways to work with other companies to help do that education.
Yeah.
We're really the starting point of doing that.
We have a lot of listeners that probably like myself have created our own startup or who are thinking of doing a startup. If there's someone that's listening that's interested in creating a startup that's going to do something like what you did, which is create a product that becomes a differentiator, tech-ish risk assessment type of thing, what advice would you give them selling into the insurance ecosystem, which notoriously is very difficult to do?
Yes.
How did you do it, and what advice would you give?
I would say the best advice I could give is you really have to understand your buyer. A lot of technology is not created by people who are in that specific business. We're lucky that I built something from a perspective of a producer, understanding what a producer needed, understanding what a business owner needed. So educating yourself and really understanding what it is. A lot of people have great ideas like, wow, I got this great idea. It's okay, that's great. Let's slow down for a second. Let's look at really how can that affect somebody? How can that affect the decision? When we started, I knew that we had something great. Taking it from this level, which took us a long time to really get to the point where all of a sudden we're going through the roof. There were some key things that really happened in order to do that. And one of the most key and influential things that we did that really started to change things was understanding the real need and even being a producer, how to get somebody to use something, right? Software, it's great. Getting somebody to use software, that's a problem. So we try to find different ways to do that by listening. So we listened a lot, and we have a totally open door policy. We love our users. We love it when they let us know what it is that they want. We build around it. We don't ignore them. We really listened a lot, and we came up with a great concept, and then we implemented it. And that was the ability to actually scrape an experience mod worksheet, from a WCRB or NCCI and be able to implement our reports in a matter of seconds versus our competitor who takes an hour, 3 hours, 2 days, depending on the size. That was a differentiator for us. So finding the ability to not only have a great idea, finding the things that you needed to get somebody to really use the product, but then really finding a way to make it so easy to use that it makes no sense not to use it. Don't overcomplicate it. Simplify it. Let the producers, let your users do their job of taking the data you're giving them and transition it into their process. And that's really what we try to do, is not dictate that for them, but give them the flexibility of doing so. So there's a lot of challenges along the way. We have a lot of challenges ahead of us as we continue to grow. Don't give up and just really look at your market, look at, who's buying, Insurance industry, it's not a very, they don't like to spend money.
Yeah.
They like to make money.
Well, you made the interesting point about, creating a product that they ultimately won't use.
Right.
To me, that's always advice I try to give to insurtech professionals, because I've been on the other side, both internally in a carrier where we built things and then nobody used it. This is urgent push. We need this, we need this, we need this. Then we build it, and 2 months go by. It's like, so have you tested it? Oh, we've been busy.
Right.
Wonderful. You just, used up a bunch of resources to build something that's just going to collect dust on it. So that's crucial, I think, for anyone that's listening, that's selling into the system, is getting it in is the first step, but that's far from over. If they don't use it and give you feedback and they don't implement it into their processes, it's game over. Because as soon as it comes up for renewal, they'll look around that boardroom or that table and just say, so what do you guys think? We need to cut budget. What do we cut? We're not using this thing. Let's cut it, and now you're done. So that's actually really sound advice. You mentioned data. Pulling data into your system. I've done some workers' compensation, modeling and some work around that. I found the data to be excruciatingly bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
The stuff that gets collected. In particular, two things really stuck out to me. One was you take a state like California, which is essentially really multiple states. The North is very different than the South, which is very different from the central area.
Yeah.
But those class codes we talked about, doesn't matter where you are, it's the same rate.
Yeah.
And I know in Southern California, Justin and I joke around about this. A lot of billboards in Southern California of plaintiffs' attorneys that are trying to get people to sue their employers for whatever reason. So that's one thing, is just from a geographic standpoint, it's hard. It seems to me hard to recognize or come to the conclusion that class code represents everybody in that state in the correct way. There must be a lot of variance. And that's something that sort of came up over and over again. As an industry, what can we do about that? You talked specifically about back pain or I don't know what term you use, but there was injury to a back, right? Mm-hmm. That could be lots of different things.
Yeah.
As an industry, when will we start collecting more information that will allow entrepreneurs like you to slice and dice that data in cooler, more sophisticated ways?
The state actually, the data's there, right? They have all the data that comes in, and it could technically be segregated, appropriately by area, zip code, so forth, so on. And the insurance carriers themselves are aware of this data, and they do use it currently. They use it in counties. Specifically, Los Angeles County is probably one of the most expensive areas to purchase insurance. And the insurance companies themselves, you may be in San Diego County and you start with the same base rate, but you get debited if you go to, there's a surcharge in Los Angeles County based on a specific zip code. And primarily that is because of what you said, the legal side. There are a lot of attorneys in the Los Angeles area who are out there, and they're looking, I mean, they're ambulance stations. They're looking for that person who gets hurt. They're providing, every single opportunity for them to fight and do what they need to do to get, a claim going and try to get a little bit more money. The end consumer, the end loser is everybody. We're all losing because of it. Even the injured workers losing because they have to share, with the attorney. There are certain circumstances where obviously having an attorney, because they're fighting a system that isn't necessarily working for them, is very important. But then unfortunately, we also have those instances where, it's not. We have a lot of fraud. A lot of fraud in California specifically, and nationwide. And unfortunately, we just don't have we haven't put the funds that are necessary to really fight this fraud. That is really the true driver of a lot of the insurance costs across the state, is because of that. So I would say, we really have, we have some pieces in place. We have the ability to do the different things that we need to. For whatever reason, and I don't understand it necessarily, is why we haven't focused in certain areas to take advantage of our knowledge of what is going on. And, like you said, in your mind, it's not there. It's because in most people's minds, it's not there. They're not thinking about the fact that they can take advantage of it. As Modgic itself, as a product continues to grow and expand, we have a long-term plan to really provide some really cool tools that will help dissect some of that data. But there are some companies out there who actually do it and do it quite well. So I think there's still a whole lot of opportunity for us to improve and look at what we can do to get those costs down.
Now, what does your team look like? It's a software product, but in order to crunch those numbers, I'm not sure if you had to hire an actuary or a statistician or whatever. What's the team look like that was required to kind of put all of this together?
I have a great partner, who, when I came up with the idea and the concept, we'd been friends for many years. And honestly, I never knew that he actually was in software. I actually developed the entire product completely in Excel. That's how it started. Was just trying to go through that. We don't have to do a lot of the actuarial work. It's really a bunch of formulas. Understanding the formulas was really important, to be able to get these results out. But we don't have a lot of people in the background who are in computers and typing in data. We built a system that is very self-sustaining and is able to do more than most would ever be able to imagine by simply looking at the data that we have in the system and transitioning and translating it into the reports that we have and producing the experience mods, for next year and the year after that and the year after that. So, from that perspective, I've got a great partner. We have customer service, who's really the backbone of the company. And that's the most important to us, is making sure that we answer the phone when it rings. We respond to the emails immediately. There are no tickets. You get that personal one-on-one. And then we've got, a great sales force as well that does a good job really transitioning this information and showing our clients and potential clients, what Modgic is and how it can really help them. But software, it's such a cool. When I first got into software, I thought, wow, this is so cool. You can really do whatever you want. You don't need 100 people working for you. All you have to do is get a system to run the operation. Our training platform is, our users love it. They come in and we walk them through 5 videos or 6 videos, actually 7 videos, and from start to finish, and they're absolute experts by the time they're done. And we don't have a lot of people who have to come back and ask us questions, which makes our software really, really cool. When they come back, they're usually, hey, I love the software. I got this person to refer to you. Let us know how we can help. And that's that's really what we're all about. We kind of look at ourselves as our family. Our users are our family, and we love them, and we want to make sure that we do everything to continue to grow and help them.
Yeah, I love that. It's great to hear. It's great to hear. We're getting towards the end of the recording, so I'm going to transition over to the more personal side of Scott Knowles and who you are. So, question I ask all my guests are: when you aren't working, what do you enjoy doing?
So I'm lucky enough. I live on 2.5 acres. I've got a small little vineyard on the property, and I've got 5 kids. I love my kids to death. We try to do whatever we can on a regular basis, daily basis, and hang out. But family is, I kind of take this a different direction, but fatherhood is really, I think, number one in anybody's life. You have to be a good father. You have to really look at yourself constantly. Am I doing things right? I've always never made the right decisions, but always try to. And being a good husband, obviously, is also very important. You got to keep that relationship with your family. And I got a beautiful, fantastic wife. Supports me in everything I do. Then obviously you got to focus on your health and your career, and then your friends. I mean, that's, in my mind, those are my priorities. Day in, day out. What I live to. Yeah, I mean, I love to play golf. I've been golfing since I was probably 3 years old. Love to go deep sea fishing. I'm lucky I get to go next week. Enjoy to travel. I'm a car freak. I love cars, so that's probably my back pocket, is being on the road and driving cars.
You're in the right state.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's nothing like driving up and down the coast. I've done it quite a few times, but yeah, I know we had to embrace the technology world. And so, I'm lucky that I get to play with Modgic actually in my car, on my Tesla, and with a big screen, you actually bring up our software, which is really cool.
That's cool.
Play around, and we do a lot of testing actually in there to try to get the system to 100% work. So even a lot of our users could actually go in there and do the work. So we actually use the cars to really do testing, constantly on how can we overcome some of these cool things. So we absolutely embrace technology 1,000%, from that perspective.
Do you make wine?
It's funny. I have 186 vines. And for the last, when I bought the property 3 years ago, when I bought the property, 90% of the vines were just not doing so well. So I've been bringing them back to life. And so I've trained what I could to come back. We're hopeful that maybe next year we'll be able to do some picking. We get grapes every year, which is great. But next year is the hope that we'll be able to do some actual picking and stomping and so forth, so on. But in actuality, I have what's called a wine barn, and I've turned it into my beer barn. So I do a lot of beer brewing rather than wine brewing. So I'm a big IPA connoisseur. So
Yeah.
I brew about 20 gallons of beer at a batch.
Well, the good news is when you're ready to do the wine, you have a big enough family that you get free labor.
Yes, yeah. I have to
They would
check
love that. I bet that's a lot of fun, stomping on the wine. Scott, how do you what tools or techniques do you use to stay productive and or organized?
I would say that actually my favorite tool that I found about a year ago is HubSpot. Hands down, HubSpot has been so important for us to really get organized and follow not only our sales process itself, understanding, from the very beginning of who our client is, just by putting an email address and learning all about the company that they work for, all the way through to establishing some very key steps from the beginning to end. So we never lose sight of who's there, who we talk to, where opportunities are. But then also what's really cool about it is it also has a bunch of platforms in there that allow us to also implement the same type of rules when it comes to training and or customer service, as well as now we've implemented some things with our contracts. So we've digitized pretty much everything where we use another add-on which I think also is a really, really cool and add-on for doing contracts. Everybody's, familiar with some of the other contract type services, but this one is called Get Accept. And Get Accept allows me to actually send a contract to a prospect. I can add a video message to them, thanking them for their business. So the minute they get it, they get a great video message from me. They open it up. I know the minute they open it, I can track their progress. I can see when they've downloaded it, when they've signed it, comes back to me. Also, the client gets an immediate copy when they do that. And it's a great way for us to also organize, our contracts and such. So those two combined have been really influential and key to, as far as software platforms goes, that we utilize to really run our business. And then, obviously, when we do a lot of webinars, so, we tend to use Join Me as our favorite webinar, because Join Me does integrate in, as does Get Accept, with HubSpot. And we're always looking to embrace new features with HubSpot and how it works and integrates. So those alone have been very, very influential and key in our business, and really taking it to the next level and offering, 1,000% best, hands down customer service. And that's what's really important to us.
Yeah, we use HubSpot here at Insurance Nerds, and just started to dabble into what it is that they can do. But yeah, I'm looking forward to really taking advantage of all the tools that they have for us internally to be able to track a lot of the stuff that we're doing. So I will add that to the show notes. I would also like to add any connection information. If people wanted to reach out to you, how would they connect with you?
Yeah, the best way to reach us is just you go to our website, www.modgic.com. And on there, you can reach out to us. There's plenty of spots to click, get a demo or contact us, all the way through there. You can also reach me directly if you ever want to reach out. I'm kind of a phone freak in the sense that if my phone rings, I pick it up. I hate
that makes you very rare.
It does. I'll tell you what, I get so frustrated when I call somebody and say, why won't you pick up your phone? And, but I'm that freak, it doesn't matter where I am or what I'm doing, and sometimes I'm on another call and say, hang on a second, I got another call coming in. I pop over and I pop back, and that's just my mentality. I want to get things done right away. When they hit us, I don't want to wait. I don't have a long list of to-dos. Actually, I don't have any to-dos aside from development to-dos that we're constantly doing with the software. But yeah, you can always reach me on my phone number, which I'll let you post up on the site if you like, and do that as well.
We'll do that. Hey, this was great. Time flew by. I learned a lot about experience mods, more than I knew before I came in. So I will share all of this information. If anyone's listening, on the show notes, just go there. We'll list everything out, including all of the connection information with Scott. Scott, appreciate you having you on Profiles and Risk.
I appreciate it very much. Thanks for the invitation, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Okay, for the audience, until next time, thank you.